And this room of like nurses was looking at me like, who eats a whole rotisserie chicken in one sitting?
Just a wee lad in college, I actually wanted to get a dual degree in both exercise science and nutrition. But when I finished my master's and I realized that it's going to take at least another 6-month internship plus more coursework to even get in the ballgame, I decided to focus on exercise instead. Now, even though I never pursued a degree in nutrition, that doesn't mean I'm not still passionate about it and I'm not continuing to learn about it to this day. I mean, after all, why wouldn't you want to invest some time learning about nutrition? Especially when you consider the fact that most of us are going to eat 3 to 4 times a day, every day, for the rest of our lives. It just makes sense. But that's also why I've decided to bring my good friend, Dr. Mike Roussell, back to the Physical Preparation Podcast. As an author, speaker, and nutrition consultant, Dr. Mike is known for transforming complex nutritional concepts into practical nutritional habits that his clients can use to ensure permanent weight loss and long-lasting health. And he's got a wide variety of clients from NBA All-Stars, Hollywood stars, Silicon Valley execs, all of whom seek him out for his unique ability and his experience in translating scientific findings into relevant and actionable strategies to achieve lifelong health. Now, if you're a regular to the show, welcome back. As always, love and appreciate you. And if you're new here, welcome. I'm Mike Robertson, and this is the Physical Preparation Podcast. In this show, we take deep dives into the art and science of coaching, cueing, program design, business, and personal development. Basically anything to help you become a better trainer, coach, or rehab professional. In this episode, Dr. Mike and I are going to dive deep into 2 topics that are very, very hot in our industry. Number 1, the great protein debate, and number 2, how coffee can be used to improve performance. But before we go there, we're going to start with Dr. Mike's 2 big nutritional rocks, and perhaps more importantly, why they haven't changed all that much over the years. We're going to go hard on the topic of protein. For instance, how much do you really need to build muscle? Or maybe as we age, to avoid muscle loss? Is protein timing really a thing? I mean, do you really need to have that protein shake 13.25 minutes after your workout? And we talk about protein prioritization. With all the different types of proteins out there and on the market, are some really better than others? After that, we talk about a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, and that's coffee. We start by talking about what got Dr. Mike started in the coffee game and why he eventually started his own coffee company. We also talk about the anti-aging and mental health benefits of BDNF and how a patented process has taken a product we all know and love and made it even more beneficial for us. I always love talking to Dr. Mike, and while I always feel a little bit smarter when we're done, I also feel like I'm slacking in life and need to get more done. So we're going to take a quick break, and then we're going to jump into this awesome new episode with my guy, Dr. Mike Roussell. It seems like every day I talk to a young trainer or coach who is frustrated. Maybe they're frustrated with the results they're getting. Maybe they're frustrated because they don't have trusted resources to learn from. And maybe they're frustrated because they simply don't have enough clients and wonder how long they'll be able to stay in the industry. So if that sounds anything like you, I've got something that I know will help. My Complete Coach certification was created for trainers and coaches just like you, who are serious about the results they get and who know that becoming a better coach can directly translate to a bigger bottom line. This certification is going to take the last 20 years of my life's work and put it all into one massive course. In it, you'll learn how to use the R7 system to create seamless, integrated, and efficient programs for clients and athletes of all shapes and sizes. How to create the culture, environment, and relationships with everyone you train so you can get the absolute best results. And the exact progressions, regressions, and coaching cues I use in the gym, from squatting and deadlifting to pressing and pulling and everything in between. Of course, there's a ton more that I cover, but that should give you a pretty good idea of what the cert is all about. Now here's the thing, spots for the certification will only open twice per year for a limited time only. To get on the insider's list, just head over to CompleteCoachCertification.com. Again, CompleteCoachCertification.com, and then stay tuned for emails in the coming weeks. Thanks so much for your support, and I hope you'll pick up a copy of the Complete Coach Certification when it launches. Dr. Mike Mann, thanks so much for coming on the show here today. Really excited to have you back on, even though it doesn't feel like we've had you on because it's been so long in between shows. But I'd love to just hear a little bit about you and what you're up to these days, man.
Yeah, no, it's great to be back. I was thinking, I think it was the first time, and maybe it was actually the last time I was on a show. It was probably a decade ago.
It's been a while.
Because I distinctly remember I was a graduate student and I had to find the spot in the lab to record it. So, which is also awesome that you've been at it for so long too. That the show has sustained. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
So I don't know if it was we both got busy or I was just a terrible guest. It took me a decade to get back. I appreciate you having me back on the show.
So talk to me, man. I would love to hear how you got started in physical preparation. I always love hearing people's backstories. So what got you into this, man?
I got into it similar to how we were talking right before we got on the show, and I was saying how my 14-year-old son is become full on physical culture dude. I was the same way. As a kid, we didn't have we didn't have the tools that we have nowadays. The knowledge and all that sort of stuff. And I was a kid in the country. And so I wanted to run faster. So I would just see how fast I could run up and down my driveway and try to run faster every day. I had a bench with the thin, the weights, not the Olympic size holes, but the little ones.
I know exactly which. It's like a Sears workout set. Yes.
Yep. I had one of those. It was the total weight was 110 pounds, everything, if I loaded everything on it. And I had it in my bedroom and used to just kind of go at it. And that was really how I got into it. And then I went away to boarding school as a kid, and that was a whole new picture because they had a weight room.
Yeah.
And I blew out my knee spring of my sophomore year, and I distinctly remember being at a supermarket in Sudbury, Massachusetts, and at the checkout line, and I saw Muscle and Fitness, and I'm like, well, I'm just going to grab this because it was the night, it was before surgery. I'm I'm going to be sitting around for a long time. So I might as well read up on this.
Right.
And so that was literally, I still have that magazine too. That was kind of the beginning, I would say, of my true journey into physical preparedness and physical culture and all that. Because I learned about training splits, and I learned about macronutrients and all that stuff. And that's just how it started. It was all, sports performance related because I just wanted to be a better athlete. Then had this little misguided journey into bodybuilding.
Okay.
And went to medical school. Found medical school not exactly what I wanted to do. I would say I joke with my wife that I'm grossly unemployable. And the path of medicine had too many people telling me what to do. So I went to a place where you could do whatever you want. I went to academia.
Yeah.
And so then I went to graduate school in nutrition, and really there fell into the best situation I could have ever imagined. I had no idea going into it how great my advisor was, or how prolific and well respected she was. She's written on the dietary guidelines multiple times, and she's very high up in the American Heart Association. So I got to learn how to be a good scientist, how to be a good thinker, how to write. They were so big on writing, and that's really when I got into writing. That was all cardiovascular disease, a little bit of metabolic syndrome, some more kind of this cardiometabolic stuff. But I really had this great appreciation for biochemistry. One of my degrees is in biochemistry. And I really think if you can understand biochemistry, then you can basically deal with any nutritional conundrum you're going to come across.
Right.
As a professional. And so I've been writing for about a year or so, this nutrition certification called Nutrition OS. And that's really the thesis. I wrote a textbook, a nutrition biochemistry textbook, and as the first book to the certification, because my thought is if we can understand this stuff, like the body only works via a set number of rules. So if
Right.
you understand the rules, you can make assumptions or educated guesses about what's going to happen, how the body's going to respond, etc. And so I was really big onto that. I loved, I loved graduate school so much because it was the situation where I could say, huh, why does short chain omega-3 fatty acids impact C-reactive protein, but long chain essential amino acids or long chain omega-3 fatty acids don't? And I spent 3 days just like printing and reading research papers to try to figure out what the answer is, right?
Right.
And guys, so missed that in my life. Like
Yeah.
just kind of but I think nutritional biochemistry is very much similar, I would say, to functional anatomy. You
Yeah.
know, like in your world, that if you can understand truly how the human body moves, then that's the unlock. You can
Yes.
figure out anything. The code.
Yep.
And I'm like always encouraging. I do a lot of talking with registered dietitians, nurses, physicians, but especially when I get to talk to young dietitians, I always really push the idea of like really understand the science.
Yeah.
And nowadays, I feel like there's a people wanting to shortcut, not understanding the science, and it's also a curse because then you hear people say stuff and you're like, and you like cringe because you're like, well,
Right.
that's not really true. And so my whole life, and I had somebody tell this when a client told me this was my superpower, is really trying to communicate nuanced science
Yes.
in a way that respects like what the actual answer is as we understand it, and
Yes.
also the person that you're talking to's understanding.
Yes.
And I know that I'm sure you've seen this too with a trainer or a coach, and they're just like spouting off, you know, anatomy mumbo jumbo to someone who's like, wait a second, is when I step one leg up on the box, is that one rep? Or do I have to go both legs and then that's one rep? You
Right.
know?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's like this respect on both sides, like respect for the science and what is actually happening, and also respect for that other person to communicate to them in a way that's going to help them, not that's going to make you feel super smart.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. So one other question before we dive in here. Talk to me about like everyday life right now, right? Like you're not just like the guy that's just in there cranking out 8-hour days, seeing just patients or clients, whatever. Like you do a lot of different things. So give us an idea of the scope of what all you're doing and working on right now.
Yeah, so I actually don't, it's funny, like I think that my career path, there's always been, if you think of it as like a pie chart of different things, private consulting, writing, kind of creative projects, consulting with like companies and groups. There's always been those set things.
Yep.
And then the amount of that pie, then it kind of changes and adjusts over time.
Sure.
Whereas for sometimes there'll be years where I do a ton of writing. Like I was at one point when writing was actually, something you could actually make money on. And publishers cared about good content.
Yes.
I was writing 20 pieces a month.
Right.
And so now I don't do as much of that freelance writing because I can only write, top 10 foods for doing whatever, without feeling like I want to bang my head on the keyboard. So there's still a little bit of writing. I've been doing a lot more with consulting with companies. So there's a lot of digital nutrition fitness companies out there that actually appreciate good information and how do we help our user reach their goals. And there's a lot of smart people out there asking really good questions. And so I actually spend a lot of time in the digital health, fitness, nutrition space, helping with like content strategy for things, but also what is the experience of a person that's using this technology?
Oh, yeah.
And like, how are they going to string together the things that you're trying to tell them to get to their end result? And how do we need to do it differently? And so they call it kind of in the industry like the user journey and also the user experience.
Yep.
So I actually spend a lot of time with that. And I'm working on a project in the digital healthcare space that's kind of a secret project right now, but in the next 2 months will be a public project. That's been about 18 months
Oh, wow.
in the works, I believe. Maybe I'm closing on 2 years. And so that's been really cool. That's a lot of fun. So I spent a fair amount of time on that. Um, I have a supplement company that has gone through a couple different iterations over the years and now is called Substance Nutrition, partly just due to we licensed a product to a company that, fingers crossed, maybe by the time this comes out, we'll have retail distribution with a major drugstore. Um, and created a protein powder called Synthesis that launched this July. So there's kind of that project, and I have my corporate clients. I still keep a couple private clients because I think it's so important to to understand like what are the things that people are doing on a daily basis
Yep.
that they're thinking, they're struggling with, throughout my whole career, I've always done that. And I've always like I know some people who are like, well, I don't do private client work. And I'm like, I know, but it's just so good.
Yeah.
Companies like they pay to have focus groups come in to like tell them like that's your focus group is like actual people.
Right.
Um, so that I have a couple other writing projects, like I mentioned, this nutrition certification called Nutrition OS. We've been piloting that with a group of trainers. That's a project with Pat Rigsby that we've been working on for a bit. So it's I would say my day to day is very variable,
Yes.
but it is a mix of private consulting, some of my own projects, and consulting with companies.
Very cool. Very cool. Okay, so I got a couple big topics I want to jump into, but before we go there, for people that are unfamiliar with you or your philosophy, I'd just love to hear like your nutritional big rocks. So if
Yeah.
somebody came to Dr. Mike Roussell and said, "Hey man, what are your thoughts on nutrition? Give me the elevator pitch." How would you describe that to somebody?
So I think the cool thing about this is that it hasn't changed that much over time. If anything, it's gotten a little more nuanced.
Yeah.
So in 2005, 2006, I came up with this idea of the six pillars of nutrition. And the six pillars of nutrition, it's still now in 2022. I'm like, if you do that, you're doing pretty good.
Right.
Like that, it gets you there. But I would say if we focus, how do we focus on something to make it even easier? Like I had this client once, and he was like, I was telling him, "This is what you need to do," and he's like, "Nah, I'm never going to do that. Make it easier, make it simpler." And I'm like, "Well, how about this?" He's like, "No, make it simpler." And he was like really pushing me to like, how do I distill this down? And so now I would say, and this is a long elevator pitch, but I'm like leading up to what it is.
That's all right.
The two things, because you can only carry so many big rocks, right? The two things that would be are protein at every meal and eat primarily minimally processed foods. And I would account minimally processed foods as in the category of unprocessed foods. So that would be like a carrot or an apple, and then that hasn't undergone any processing. And a minimally processed food is then something like oatmeal. So it's like the oats, but they've like mashed them so you can actually eat them, or nuts, so they've been roasted, but you don't add other things to it.
Right.
Right. You've just kind of processed it to make it more palatable, for you to eat it. If you eat protein every meal and you focus on eating mostly minimally processed foods, those would be the two biggest things for people to do.
I love it. I love it. And this actually goes seamlessly into kind of this first section because I'd love to talk about protein. I feel like this is something you and I have talked about in person. I know you've lectured on it. And obviously, it's every bro in the gym's favorite macronutrient to discuss.
Yes.
So let's start with arguably the biggest question. How much protein do we really need on a daily basis? And then kind of as a 1B to that, how do our protein needs shift or change if our goals are, say, more strength and hypertrophy focused, which probably most of us cared about when we were younger? And how does it maybe shift or change if maybe now we're more focused on longevity? Because I feel like there's some interesting research in that domain as well. So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yep. So I would say the base answer, you're like, how much protein should we eat? And if you're an active resistance training person, it should fall somewhere between 30 grams at every meal and 1 gram per pound body weight.
Fair enough.
And it's kind of for two reasons. If you look at a lot of the research in athletes, and this would be supporting recovery or muscle hypertrophy. 1 gram of protein per pound body weight is seems to be the amount that it's optimal for someone. You can go a little bit higher, but it's not that much better. And if you go a little bit lower, because actually with trained athletes, like trained athletes can actually get away with less protein because their bodies have become more efficient. But if you look less than not like in the athlete space, but more like the recreational athlete, and 30 grams of protein at every meal or at every eating occasion, like let's say the post-workout shake. So for maybe an average person, that gets you 120, at least 120 grams of protein. So you're 30 at every meal, and then post-workout. What that does is that every single eating occasion, you're going to be maximizing your body's ability to build and repair muscle. Like you're turning on that switch. And you're also providing your body, if you're eating the high quality proteins, with those building blocks. Like I think that's where kind of people miss on protein. Like, yes, you need to maximize, you turn on the muscle building switch. So you turn the light on in the room, but then you also need to put it together like Legos. Like you need to build the muscle and repair it.
Right.
And 30 grams, at a meal is going to do that. As you get bigger, it scales a little bit. But I remember having a conversation. I would say one of the greatest protein researchers of all time was a gentleman named Doug Patton Jones. Doug passed away about a year ago. But I was so fortunate to be friends with him. Because we did speaking circuits together. And I remember sitting down and talking to him at this, we were at this event called the Strength Summit, which was kind of like a protein research bonanza,
right?
Where you like talked protein research and ate beef. And, it was like the best. It was pretty much the best you could ever. It was the funnest thing ever. Right.
Yeah.
And so I was like, Doug, because I always think it's interesting to talk to researchers more in the back of the room, in the hallway, kind of at the bar, because I want to know like what their opinion is. Because I think a good researcher is very good at being objective when they're on stage and saying, here's what the data shows, we did this, and then here's what happened. But everybody's human and everybody has ideas of their own, where they'll see something and they're thinking to themselves, I wonder if it's this. But, I would say they're professional enough not to share that on stage in a scientific setting because it's not appropriate.
Right.
So if you get them off, kind of off stage, then I find it to be really interesting. And so I remember talking with Doug and I was like, what do you think the difference between, because Doug was the one who literally did the research that discovered 30 grams of protein maximizes muscle protein synthesis. Like whether it's 30 grams or 90 grams, there's a 46% increase. Like Doug was the guy who did that. And he said, I was like, what do you think the difference between 30 grams a day or 30 grams per meal and 1 gram per pound body weight? Because one of the confusing things about protein is recommendations are given at different metrics. There's a meal-based metric, there's a grams per pound body weight metric, there's also a percent calorie metric. And if you calculate those for one individual, they could actually be 3 different amounts.
Yeah.
And like, wait a second, what do I need? And he said he thinks the difference for the average recreationally active person doing 30 grams at every eating occasion versus 1 gram per pound body weight is a nominal difference. And I think because what's going to happen is the average person, when you look at their eating behavior, can hit 120 grams of protein with some paying attention.
Yep.
If you're 180 pounds, to go from 120 grams of protein to 180 grams of protein consistently, it's hard to do that just by eating.
Right.
Like you're gonna add shakes. Like you're gonna need to do this little extra. And so for the average person on a muscle basis, the cost benefit, I don't really know if it nets out benefit wise to drive that to 180.
Okay.
With this typical person. So what I usually tell people is start making sure you're getting a legitimate portion of protein at every meal and a recovery shake. And then scale your protein intake up more as needed. And I would say as needed if you're having trouble recovering, you're not making the progress you'd like, or if you find that you're still hungry, because protein has these strong satiety effects, which is basically delaying the effect of hunger. So you eat, you're not hungry. How long until you're hungry again? Protein helps extend that time period. And so if you find that you're hungry all the time, then going with more protein is valuable, because the other cool thing about protein is that, well, there's this threshold of about 30 grams to maximize those muscle building signals. The satiety effects of protein are dose response.
Yeah.
So, and they only kick in at about 30. Like 30 is the minimum. So if you eat 40 and then you eat 50, like 50, you're going to be much more satiated than 30. And I was giving this talk, and I should have known better. And I was talking about this idea. I'm like, if you've ever sat down to eat an entire rotisserie chicken, like, that protein is satiating on a dose response effect. And this room of like nurses was looking at me like, who eats a whole rotisserie chicken in one sitting?
Most meatheads that are bodybuilding on a budget.
I was like, you know what? I've been doing this for like 10, 15 years, and you still got to remember, you got to know your audience. But that if you sit and you eat a lot of protein food, it is very satiating, and the more you eat, the more filling it is. So that's the other benefit for people. Start at this, say 120 grams per day threshold, and there's a large, cohort of protein researchers that are looking and trying and have been for 5-8 years to change nutritional recommendations to be meal-based for protein. And to get away from kind of what the RDA is, which is more about essential nutrient deficiencies.
Right.
So long-winded answer to 30 grams per meal per eating occasion, up to 1 gram per pound body weight. From a hypertrophy perspective, if you're getting 1 gram of protein per pound body weight, it's more calories and your training are likely the limiting factor, not protein.
Gotcha.
And you will find one-off studies every 5 or so years that seem to come out and show, if you really juice your protein intake, that there will be this additional bump in muscular hypertrophy and strength. And it just comes down to like cost benefit. Eating 320 grams of protein a day is like, it seems unnecessary and unnecessarily expensive. When you could get
chicken's expensive these days, my guy.
Yeah, everything is expensive nowadays.
Expensive,
yes, especially like I used to, I have done a lot of work over the years with the National Cattlemen's Beef Association and helping them with their research programs around protein and such. And it's like price has always been something that has been something to talk and around them when they're thinking about their product. And it's hard for everybody because the cost is so expensive. It's like everything is lobster now.
Yeah.
But so the high end of protein intake, I just don't think you need to go there.
Yeah.
And there's not really this huge benefit. As you get older, you are going to likely need slightly more protein. But we talk about more. This is the difference between a gram per pound and 1.2 grams per pound body weight. It's not let's triple our protein intake, but you're likely going to need a little bit more. And part of that is also, as you get older, your body's ability to lose muscle, like the atrophy effect, is really significant. So it's muscle loss is more of an issue than lack of muscle gain as you get older. I mean, gaining muscle, like if we're being honest, gaining muscle is hard at any age north of 25, right?
Right.
Like it's like really hard. That's like you telling my 14-year-old son, like, man, you are in the heyday right now.
Yes,
like you just
enjoy it, man.
Soak it up. But the thing that really does accelerate is muscle loss and atrophy. And Doug Patton-Jones, he did a study once looking at bed rest because he used to do a bunch of research for NASA. And so they would do bed rest to mimic weightlessness. And they did 20-year-olds. I want to say they're 50-year-old people, but could be 40, could be 65. But give me that plus or minus, right?
Yep.
The net was that the older group lost muscle at 3 times the rate of the younger group, of the 20-year-olds, in this bed rest scenario. And so, I mean, you could apply this to all kinds of things like March Madness when you're on the couch for 3 weeks, right? To just being at work and being at your desk. And so I think as we get older, the thing that we're really fighting is muscle loss. And that's why protein at every meal and really hitting those protein targets, I think is so important, because as you then fast forward even more, your lean body mass is so predictive of your health later in life and also your longevity, because falls, fractures, and strength become such an issue.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's cool research with people who are like 100 years old and they have them doing like resistance band training. And there's not any like hypertrophy gains, because when you're 100, like how are you going to actually, like gain muscle mass, right?
Right.
But they gain strength, and then that strength translates into better health outcomes.
Yep.
And so it's really cool. But I think as you get older, you are going to need slightly more protein, but the focus is really how do we mitigate muscle loss, which for me is part fighting a sedentary life
Yep.
and protein intake.
Got it. Okay. So along that same thought process, let's talk timing of protein intake. And you and I came up in the golden era where if you didn't have your shake 13.25 minutes after your workout, you lost all the muscle gains, right? Like you might as well have not trained. Now,
Well,
it sounds ridiculous, but that's what we thought, at least for a certain period of time. It was like 1 hour. If you didn't have the shake, just forget about it. But in all seriousness, is it just as easy at this point to just spread it out across the day and like the 3 or 4 meals, or is there more to timing? What are your thoughts there?
I mean, I think the timing thing for when we came up, it may or may not have worked. I mean, I don't know, because I never missed it.
Yeah,
Like I
that's
was
true.
never, people were like, well, if you don't get it in this 20-minute window, it's a loss. I'm like, well, I wouldn't know, because I win every time. Like,
That's right.
I did not miss a shake for forever.
I know.
I've snuck ground beef and rice into movie theaters. So
That's awesome. That's awesome.
So I think what we're really starting to, I think, appreciate now, it's actually interesting too, because the idea that you needed protein right after exercise was kind of more of a like bastardization of like carbohydrate needs, because there is this immediate right after exercise, like your muscles are sponges, and if you wait 45 minutes or 90 minutes, you're not going to be able to replete glycogen as fast.
Yep.
Right. And then, so that's why like post-workout carbs are so big. And then people are like, well, let's do post-workout protein too, because if you add a little protein to your carbs, it does glycogen replenishment even more. And then we just decided not to ask the question, like, is glycogen replenishment even important for us? Like rapid glycogen replenishment, right? It took like 6 years before anybody was like, yeah, but I'm not going to train again for 72 hours, and what I do isn't that glycogen intensive.
Right.
Right. And so, but I think the protein thing then got roped into that question. What we do know is that right after exercise, you get a bump in muscle protein synthesis, right? Even if you don't do anything, because basically your body's smart. It's like, we just thrashed, we need to rebuild some stuff.
Yep.
And so exercise does that. Eating protein will also, just even if you're sitting around, eat some protein, you're getting a bump, 46% increase in muscle protein synthesis. But if you have both exercise and protein, you get not just a larger increase in muscle protein synthesis, but it sustains for 5 hours compared to 3 hours. So you get this stronger and longer signal to build and repair muscle. It's not, though, that you need it immediately afterwards. There's, call it a 2-hour window, 3 hours window, to get it in there. What I think more is important for people is less about how close to exercise do I need to get in the protein, but just thinking about your entire day. So getting in enough overall protein is like number one priority.
Yep.
Then spreading your protein out like someone who wants to optimize their health is the second one, because historically, a lot of protein at dinner, minuscule amounts of protein at breakfast, some at lunch. So spreading that out to be more reasonable throughout the day, that would be phase 2. And then phase 3 would be getting in extra protein shortly after exercise. And this is where protein shakes really come into play, because the other nuance on protein is that you need to have a break between protein eating sessions in order
Mm,
to maximize the effect.
okay.
So this again goes back to, people like you're joking about us with the post-workout protein thing. Cool thing about, and this just we say when we were younger, makes us sound really old, was that there wasn't a lot of documentation. Like there's no pictures of me drinking protein powder. Like in 15 years, everybody who's recording all the things that are doing now that are stupid,
Yes.
like
It's
that's
all
gonna
going to be
still
out
be there.
there.
Yes. Um, but so what the thing is, so the other thing that's not recorded being stupid is like carrying a jug of like amino acids or like a large thing of protein and drinking it nonstop, right?
Yes.
Because you needed a constant flow of amino acids. Turns out that's actually not a good thing. Because in science, there's this thing called the refractory period where you get a rise in amino acid levels and that flips the signal. But then you need them to go back down to then get the rise again.
Mm.
It's kind of like if your kids are constantly screaming in the house, right? You just don't really pay attention. Like my sisters or my parents show up, they're like, God, it's so loud in here. I'm like, really? I didn't notice, right? And so you need the signal to go down to get it up again. And so with food, with whole food, it's about a 4 to 6 hour window. So eat a
Okay.
meal, wait 4 to 6 hours, eat another meal. Liquid protein is different because it's digested so quickly. Like it gets into your bloodstream so fast, it spikes and then comes back down so quick that you can actually do that every 2 hours.
Mm.
So if you're somebody, you're like, well, I'm eating breakfast, lunch, dinner, protein, solid food meals, and then I'm going to have a liquid shake after I work out. Just try to time that liquid shake so it's, 90 to 2 hours before you're going to eat a solid food meal. I think that's more important than instantly after your workout,
Gotcha.
you know? And that
Gotcha.
if you could do that, you basically get to double dip on the benefits of exercise and also the muscle protein synthesis kind of spikes throughout the day. And if you're someone who say, hey, look, I train 3 days a week and I train at 5 and then I eat dinner at 6 and it's a solid food meal, that's probably going to be fine for you. Like
Yeah.
that's not the limiting factor in accelerating your progress.
Gotcha. Okay. So, last but not least, I want to talk about type of protein. Because, again, if you've been in this game for any period of time, it's like, let's just start listing all the options: whey casein blends, plant
Yes.
proteins and all of their derivatives, collagen. I mean, you get the point. There's like a
Oh yeah.
bazillion options out there. So, streamline this, make it easy for somebody like myself who is interested in nutrition, wants to know a little bit about nutrition. Like, how would you describe them, and maybe what are some of our better options?
So I am a big believer in whey protein. I remember I was talking with this guy who's like the head editor of Men's Health, and we were talking about soy versus whey. And there was some more research on soy coming out showing it was a good, it was a quality protein that was absorbed well and was a beneficial protein to use. And he was like, "Yeah, but whey is just better, so why not use what's better?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's exactly true." I mean, unless you have a thing against whey, like why not just use the best one? Like we're out here
Right.
inventing all these other kinds of proteins. Um, I don't even think we have time to talk about collagen because it's just ridiculous. Like, here's what we should do. Let's take something that doesn't support muscle growth or recovery at all, and then tell people to have it after their workouts.
Hmm.
Like, unless we're talking about I know Bill Hartman's got some joint protocol where you got to do these 1.25 reps and collagen within
Yeah.
15 minutes of each other, right?
Yeah.
But that's like that's like let's repair cartilage and something different.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about muscle recovery, like you should just throw out the collagen. Um, but so I think whey protein is the king because it's absorbed quickly. It has an incredible amino acid profile based on what people need. And so that's always, it tastes good if you get a high quality one. So you get a whey protein isolate, right? So there's isolate and then there's concentrate and then there's just whey protein, which is kind of like who knows. But you're like, I don't know, or milk protein. That would be what they call it, milk
Yeah.
protein. Basically, the difference between whey protein concentrate and whey protein isolate is the levels of purification. So isolate's going to be more expensive because they've purified it more. You're going to get, 0 to 1 grams of carbohydrate, usually half a gram of fat per serving, because everything's been filtered out except for those amino acids.
Gotcha.
Um, that should be, in my opinion, the bulk of your of your protein intake. I also do like though micellar casein. So it's like a type of casein. It's sort of an undenatured, purified form of casein. That casein is the other milk protein, and the benefit of casein is that it's more anti-catabolic than whey.
Mm,
So we were talking about there's two parts here. There's muscle building, but then there's also slowing muscle breakdown due to just the absorption kinetics and that amino acid makeup. Casein is better at um, slowing or attenuating muscle breakdown.
okay.
So you mix those two together where you get enough of the muscle building side on the whey protein isolate, you get enough micellar casein to help slow, and attenuate muscle breakdown. And to me, that's the perfect combination. Going into other things, like you could do egg. There's beef protein isolate. Like you could do some of those things. None of them taste as good. Like whey just works. It's like, why would you use anything other than Creapure creatine? It's the one that all the research studies use. It just works. I think on the plant-based protein side, the amount of progress there is insane
Hmm.
because even 6 years ago, all plant proteins tasted like grass clippings and dirt,
Yeah, they were awful.
and the amino acid profile was no good. What they've been able to do now with plant protein blends, and if you're looking to do a plant protein, I definitely recommend you do a blend of proteins because they do that to basically optimize how it tastes, but also the amino acid profile. And so if you don't do whey for because it's an animal product or because you have a protein allergy, then a plant protein blend you can actually do really well nowadays with.
Hmm.
Whereas previously it was very difficult. I think it's also to appreciate there's a difference between solid food protein and protein shakes. Like your body treats them distinctly different. We were talking about the satiating effects of protein. You don't get that with shakes. Like liquid protein is about as satiating as carbohydrate, which isn't to say it's not satiating. It's just not like eating protein. It's
Right.
like drinking 40 grams of whey is not the same as eating 40 grams of chicken breasts. 40 grams of protein from chicken breast is just different.
Right.
So if you're looking to maximize feelings of fullness, you need to leverage food.
Yep.
If you're looking for convenience for compliance sake, or you're looking to get that kind of speed and some of those advantages, like we were talking about post workout, that's when liquid protein comes in. If you're having trouble meeting your protein needs, protein shakes are definitely there to help.
Gotcha.
So I think that's an important distinction. On the whole food protein side, there's some research also suggests that, especially at breakfast, eating a variety of proteins from different sources, leads to greater satiety throughout the day too. So don't be afraid to kind of mix. It's a little bit of yogurt and some scrambled eggs and some oatmeal. That mixing protein sources can also help foster greater satiety as well.
Wow. Very cool. Okay, so I want to shift gears a little bit. Obviously, not a macronutrient, but something everybody loves talking about, which is coffee. And obviously, this is something you have been in the game with for a little while now. For starters, just talk to me about how did Neuro Coffee come about?
So Neuro Coffee came about part as my quest to like help people consistently do things that would improve their health.
Mm,
And I think that behavior change is very, very hard. And so the best way then to help improve health is say, well, don't change your behavior. Let's just do this similar behavior and get better results. Right.
okay.
It's like
Yeah.
optimizing your workout, your post workout shake. Like you don't have to do anything different. Like do the same thing, but let's just do a slightly different version.
Right.
And one of the things, my wife is a speech pathologist, and she'd worked for a time in some nursing homes and assisted living. And she had always observed that no matter what was going on with someone, with their age or their cognition, like they always drank coffee. Like there's just something weird about the
Mhm.
ritual of drinking coffee that is a direct connection to the human soul.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know I'm preaching to the choir,
I
right?
know. Yeah.
Uh, um, and and so I was like, man, well, if we could like mess around with coffee to make it that same experience, but provide something that people aren't getting otherwise, that would be magic. And so that's kind of how I got around to Neuro Coffee. Turns out you can't really add a lot of different things to coffee without changing it. And then if you change the coffee taste, that that
Ruins
ruins the whole
everything.
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what we're able to, I came across these compounds. It was essentially this antioxidant concentrate from coffee fruit. So coffee is comes from a bean like a cherry, and the fruit's usually discarded in the field. And so through some patented processes, it's usually discarded because it gets moldy. So through some patented processes, the coffee fruit is preserved, mold free, and then the antioxidants are extracted. So it's like freeze dried. The antioxidants are extracted, and those antioxidants from the whole coffee fruit itself increase a protein in your body called BDNF, which a lot of us exercise folks know because it's like exercise is good for your brain because when you exercise intensely, it boosts this brain derived neurotrophic factor, which helps with neuron growth, helps with neuron repair. BDNF decreases when we're stressed, when we eat too much sugar as we get older, don't get enough sleep. But basically, most of the things we're doing on a daily basis, right?
Right. Right.
And so we put this extract into coffee, and there's two clinical studies showing that this extract increases BDNF in humans in the dose that we infuse into neuro coffee. So the idea was drink your same coffee as normal, but it's supercharged to essentially help fight back against the stresses of modern life and to help improve your body's ability to grow and repair neurons and support those processes.
Wow. That's super cool. So basically, do the thing you're doing all the time and get better like life results.
Yes.
That's very
Yes.
cool.
By default. Yep.
That's very cool. Okay. So, kind of along those same lines, I know everybody is thinking this, but is there a limit on how much coffee you should be drinking? Now, obviously, it's bad business for you to say no, but being the balanced practitioner I know you are, I just love to hear your thoughts on this or what you tell people. Like, what is a normal amount of coffee to drink in a day?
So researchers in coffee, like all researchers, I guess, aren't fully connected to how humans behave in real life. Because in a research study, a cup of coffee is 8 ounces. Like never in my life have I ever had 8 ounces of coffee and been like, that's a cup. Like if
Yeah,
I
that's
poured eight
great.
ounces of coffee, my wife would look at me and be like, and where's the rest? Right?
Right.
Like you can't go to a coffee Tim Hortons, Starbucks, Dunkin'. Like you can't go there and get 8 ounces.
No.
It just doesn't exist. So 8 ounces, an 8 ounce cup is what they use in research studies. 4 to 6 cups a day of is really when so you do the math on that, right? That's actually where you really start getting some of these benefits from like protection against diabetes, protection against dementia. Like coffee is the number one source of antioxidants in the American diet, which is one, a testament to how awesome coffee is, and two, a disparaging comment about the fact that we don't eat fruits and vegetables.
Right. Right.
Right?
Right.
So it's like this like backhanded compliment. But so you can, and for most people, then at that point, like caffeine becomes the limiting factor.
Yep.
Where they just you don't feel good. And so you can actually drink a lot of coffee. Where people get themselves in trouble is when your coffee looks more like you got it as a dessert at Dairy Queen versus
Yes.
coffee that came from a Mr. Coffee pot. That's the sticking point for most people. Drinking coffee is not bad for you. It's all the other things we do.
Mm.
If you're having a couple cups a day, you like a little bit of sugar and a little bit of cream. I've literally never had a client that I've said, "Oh, we're to the point in your nutrition journey where the sugar you're putting in your coffee is holding you back."
Right.
Like keep the ritual, enjoy it, but just keep it reasonable. It's like I'll tell clients with alcohol, like sometimes it's not the alcohol, it's like all the food you eat after you have the alcohol that is the problem, right? And so with
Yes.
coffee, it's the sugar and the whip and the frappuccino. That's really the issue. Otherwise, it's extremely helpful. And I think people are like, oh, I gave up coffee and I'm drinking tea. I don't know. It's like a net zero change. Like
Right.
tea is really good for you. It just kind of has better PR, and because coffee is also really good for you.
Yeah.
Uh, and so I think both are equal. So if you're saying, "Oh, I'm going to give up coffee because we're moving into that time of year where people start giving up stuff," and I'm gonna give up coffee because it's not good for me, like don't do that. Like save yourself, be happy, avoid the headaches, keep drinking coffee.
Gotcha. Okay, one more question because I know we're up against the clock here. You have a lot of stuff going on. I would just like to hear more about substance nutrition as a whole. What you're doing there. I mean, obviously, you've got a lot of things going on, but just talk to me about that and what you got going on.
Sure. So substance nutrition is, you can check it out at substancenutrition.com. Uh, Neuro Coffee used to be kind of its own standalone brand, and now it's part of Substance Nutrition. And with Substance Nutrition, we also have Synthesis, which is a whey protein isolate micellar casein blend. So I kind of got to this point where I was like, hey, I want to make the protein that I want to drink.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to the point where my kids and family, they were like, oh, I'd like to use this. What do you think about this product? What do you think about that product? And you don't really know.
Yep.
And so I was able to, find the manufacturer that I was like, these guys are the best. And I have a friend who's a certified master chef. And I said, hey, can you help me make this taste really good? No artificial flavors, no artificial sweeteners, no preservatives, none of that stuff. And he more took it as a challenge. Chef Ken, he's great. And so we literally, we took 18 months, 12 months and like went through the development to get this, lots of different versions to create this protein powder that we call Synthesis. We just currently have vanilla. It's called Authentic Vanilla, and it's delicious. It really is. I had a meeting with a major grocer this week, and they told me it was the best protein powder they tasted. Like
Yeah.
there's no aftertaste to it. It doesn't have that bitterness you get with stevia or monk fruit, even though that's what we use in it. Um, and it's tested to the gills on purity. So we do, antimicrobial testing. We do heavy metal testing. Every batch is tested for more than 250 banned substances by a third party. So we're informed choice sport so that people can feel really good about, I'm going to take this. I'm going to give it to my kids. My
Yep.
kids want to use protein powder. Like, you don't necessarily want to go to the discount store because you don't know what's going to be in it. And so it was a product that created kind of out of a personal desire to have something that I felt really good about. And now people have really loved it. We launched it in July, and it's been going really well. The feedback we've gotten from people has been tremendous. And that idea of how do we take two of the highest quality types of protein, put them together, get it third party tested, like that's really resonating. Like we've had a bunch of athletes, professional athletes who are, the top athletes in their professional sports use the product. They like the taste and they feel good about all the extra steps that we've gone through to
Yes.
make it this, what you see on the label is what you're going to get in every scoop. So that's kind of the substance journey. This coming year, 2023, we're going to do chocolate's going to come out, and I'm also working on a coffee creamer that contains special fibers that actually can enhance immune function and have been shown clinically to reduce duration and intensity of upper respiratory infections. So got some kind of cool thing to make your protein shakes or your coffee like truly support your immune system.
Man, I love it, dude. You have so many irons in the fire. I always feel like I'm underperforming in life when I talk to you.
No, my God,
So,
no, don't say that.
so thanks for that, man. In all seriousness, Mike, I know you're busy. Thank you so much for coming on the show here today. Where can my listeners find out more about you and all the great stuff you're doing?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. So substancenutrition.com is where you'll find everything substance nutrition related. MikeRoussell.com, just MikeRoussell.com, is home base for everything. I have a podcast called The Dr. Mike Show that comes out once a week. I have a newsletter that's once, maybe twice a week. You can get all that there. Instagram is just at Mike Roussell. TikTok's at Dr. Mike Roussell. We've got video content that's been coming out almost daily now on those platforms too. So yeah, those are all the places to go and check it out.
I love it, man. Well, I'll make sure I get all those links in the show notes. And again, Mike, thank you so much, man. This was great.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it. It was really great to see you.
All right, my friends, that does it for this week's episode with Dr. Mike Roussell. Really hope you enjoyed it. Like I said up top, he is a wealth of knowledge. I feel like I could bring him back next week and we could talk about carbohydrates or fats or just about any topic. And he's going to have really well thought out and very succinct answers. So again, really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, one small favor to ask. If you're not already subscribed to the show, what are you waiting for, my friend? So quick, so easy. Go to wherever you consume podcasts, iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, Spotify, the Amazon store. Go there right now, hit the subscribe button so you know each and every week when a new episode drops. If you've been following the show for any period of time, you know I'm always trying to seek out world-class experts and people that will help us level up our own careers. So, my friend, as always, thank you so much for your support. Love and appreciate you, and we'll be back next week with our next episode. Take care.